our fault. We obviously tried our best to give, all the answers to the questions, but we're having to redo this because it wasn't recorded. So thanks, Alan, for taking the time to come on again and, taking time out of your busy schedule.
No worries. It's important that we get this information out there for everybody. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so we'll just get right to it because we've spent quite a lot of time already. So the first questions, the starting questions were about the scalability of Aventus and how the business works and how the business is scalable. So the basic questions were like, how is Aventus scalable and how would it work for a business? And I will add to that because they're quite similar questions, like how would Aventus help a high street business?
For sure. So in terms of scalability, right? There are a few elements to look at here. So one is just basic transactions per second. Aventus, I think, can do it at the theoretical limit about 1,000 transactions per second. So we're talking about billions and billions of transactions a month, right? So we're really well within the capacity there, within the capacity of almost any blockchain we're seeing today, except for maybe some private instances here or there. So that side of scalability is fairly straightforward. How it would work for, let's say, a high street business, the majority of the transactions that we settle on the blockchain network are not, they don't require instantaneous settlement. So you have the ability to do a lot of work behind the scenes, whether it's batching transactions or kind of other clever optimizations that can be done, because there's a time lag between when the transaction occurs in the high street retailer versus when it actually needs to be recorded on chain. So again, that allows you to do many more transactions and it gives you all kinds of optimization. Now, how it would work, we obviously are, there are a variety of different stores that might use this. I think the most prevalent use case that we've seen where blockchains really apply and add value is probably loyalty when we're talking about the high street, right? Whether it's cashback points like we've seen with Enigmatic Smile and Vow and all of them, or whether it's just normal points, even if it's aviation, credit card link points, or something a little bit more complicated like we saw from Starbucks with Odyssey, like bringing digital collectibles into it. So there's a whole variety of different things that can be done there.
So the next question is also quite similar related to that. So what's in it for a business to use AVN, and how would the role of the token AVT come into play? Like how would the use of token come into play when a new business signs up with Aventus?
Yeah, so most of the clients, we're obviously going after sort of enterprise market, or should we say some of the bigger businesses, very much a B2B play, at least in the commercial entity that I run. Now, what the Aventus network offers is all of the most critical functionality, the most used functionality you see across any blockchain, right? Fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, ways to transfer these, and ways to deal with the paying of the fees of those transactions with a nice user experience. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the person sending the transaction being the person paying for the processing of that transaction, which helps you get around certain user experience issues. So the AVN provides that base utility that anybody can kind of build on and utilize. Commercial entity that we're running, most of our clients don't really care what blockchain is used. They need a service level agreement that gives them certain guarantees, uptime, recovery, fixes, whatever, right? The normal boring stuff that you get in any enterprise agreement. The AVN having this utility and being built on solid fundamentals from Substrate and the Polkadot ecosystem allows us as a commercial entity to give those promises to businesses, and none of them have ever been broken to date, touch wood. So that's the benefit. Now, the token itself, the way it works basically is the more traffic, the more usage of the network, the more the tokens obviously used, the greater the utility, right? And there's a network effect here. The more individual businesses, 5 businesses don't make the network 5 times better, they make the network 20 times better, right? You start getting the scalability effect when you have people who can kind of interact with each other within an interoperable network. And that's what's great about the kind of architecture of the AVN, where both across the Polkadot ecosystem, so that's what, 100 different parachains, but also across the Ethereum ecosystem and then everywhere Ethereum bridges. So we're really starting to get this internet of blockchains that you can interface with and leverage the value across all of them.
Yeah. So what's the nature of costs and changes involved? If a new business was to sign up for Aventus, and what sort of changes they would have to do in their own business model, to be able to be onboarded on blockchain and use AVN services.
So from the commercial entity, what we try to do is abstract that away from the client as much as possible. People like Vodafone, for example, can't even own tokens. So you've got to find ways to work with the powers that be, essentially. So none of the pitch when we're trying to sell these services, you don't sell the product, you sell the transformation, right? So you sell, with this product, you will be this much more efficient, which means this much lower cost or this much more revenue. The detail of how you do it is third, fourth, fifth conversation, and that's more of a kind of hygiene factor where it's like, it's just got to be okay, but that's not the reason to buy. So at the end of the day, the changes that the business has to go through can be minimal, where they're essentially just using from their perspective or perception a different database, which gives certain promises and guarantees and properties that previously their other databases didn't give. But it can also be more complex, right? When we're going in and we're doing a proper tokenization transformation within these businesses, sometimes they will rework entire processes. So even if you look at, let's take aviation as an example, a big part of the challenge there is just digitization. There's no longer a guy with a pencil and a piece of paper. There's now a guy with his phone pointing the camera at the ULD, and we're using machine vision to pull that information and put it on the blockchain and put it in a system that's accessible. So it can be a complete transformation in how they're used to doing things, but always towards saving time, making people more efficient, lowering cost, and ultimately increasing profitability.
Yeah. And previously, I understand once in the chat, we were talking about partnerships, and you said until a partnership's finalized, you're not obviously, due to privacy, and you're not obviously allowed to discuss them and disclose them until everything is legally done. So once the partnership has been agreed, what sort of privacy and transparency a new partnership, a new company or a new business was expect for Aventus? Because everything's on chain, everything's on quite open for public. So what sort of privacy or transparency do they expect?
Yeah, so I mean, one could argue even the internet, when you connect to a server on the internet, you're still sending packets around that anybody can read those packets. Those packets just happen to be encrypted, right? So the blockchain is no different in that respect, where you have a degree of anonymity, obviously with the wallet-based infrastructure. And then you have various levels of encryption that you can add to secure people's data. So where some people think blockchains are these completely transparent systems and all of their data is public, that's not quite true. If you implement it correctly for the business use case, there can be the degree of transparency and the amount of sort of redacted information as with any other system. So that's just a question of implementation. But then looking a little wider, what do these partnerships look like, right? The majority of when we sign a legal agreement, obviously there's confidentiality on what the terms of any agreement are when it's two commercial entities and what can be disclosed, and anything that's publicly disclosed is agreed by both parties before it is publicly disclosed. So that's why we will try on the commercial side, at least, always make sure there's a nice big announcement of anything that's happening. But the fine-grained detail of exactly how many transactions and exactly what kind of value flows, often this is confidential information that a client doesn't want their competitors knowing or doesn't want anybody else knowing. So people can examine on-chain and see a degree of traffic moving around the network, but it's often very hard to say, okay, this traffic belongs to this client, this traffic belongs to that client, and here are the value flows. And that's by design to protect people's privacy.
Now, just discussing that privacy and transparency in mind, is there any updates you can give us on the upcoming partnerships? I understand, obviously, we just spoke about being private and keeping it, but just any update at all that you can, anything exciting coming forward?
So there are two very big deals that we're working at the moment. We have initial kind of signed terms and whatnot, but we haven't agreed the kind of public press strategy yet on the commercial side of Aventus. So there's one in the world of sports, and particularly sports publishing, and then the variety partners, the gaming partners that we're getting involved in that, a whole bunch of different partners around that effort. And then there is also something in the world of music. So obviously we have Beatport already, which is quite a big player in the music industry. But I'd argue this is one of the largest talents of all time. So those are little teasers because we have signed the deals. I just don't know when we'll be able to announce them properly. But we're getting all of the parties at the table, and we hope both of these can be a massive success across the Aventus network and ultimately for the fans and individuals consuming the content.
So do you think we'll hear about them in coming weeks, months, or maybe end of this year? Anything?
My hope is by the end of the quarter, we will announce at least one of them.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So how's the relationship going with existing partnerships? You know, how we have with London Heathrow, Vodafone, Cashback. I think the next question is quite similar, so I'll just join them together. So one was like, how's the existing partnerships going, and how's it benefited Aventus so far? Like, how is it, you know, in a positive way? How's it impacted Aventus and AVT token specifically?
Absolutely. So we have never. There's no client that has used the services of the Aventus network and decided, no, we don't want to use it anymore. So I think in that respect, it's a win. Anybody who's come, they've got what they came for and they realized the value. Some are project basis, some are recurring basis. The projects that you mentioned there, the kind of supply chain use cases, the loyalty use cases, even the kind of digital collectibles use cases, all are growing. It's just a function of slow industries in some cases, right? I mean, if you work with entities like Vodafone or Heathrow, these are big, massive enterprises whose core business, at least on the Heathrow front, is not technology. And so these kind of projects take a long time. You show success, it takes a few months until you get sign-off from the highest levels and have the various different meetings. Then you get a slightly bigger area where you can prove yourself. Same process again, slightly bigger area. So it's an iterative task to get where we want to get. But at the end of the day, the way all of these are benefiting the Aventus network is growing brand, obviously, awareness of the ecosystem itself, but also real traffic on the network. And we had hoped it would be higher by this point in time. We hope these deals would scale faster, but they're going as quickly as we can make them go. And the hope now with this sort of, the ecosystem has been fully decentralized, right? All of the code for the Aventus network is open source. Anybody can be a part of that. And actually today, I believe a governance proposal has just launched to give the community the ability to put forward any proposals themselves. So anyone can come and build on the ecosystem. The community is in charge of how this evolves moving forward. And the hope, the design with all of this is that it's not just the Aventus commercial entity driving traffic onto this network, but a variety of different parties utilizing the kind of fundamental utility of it.
Yeah, I think it's the typical mentality in crypto world, the out of sight, out of mind. So because people hadn't heard anything about Vodafone and Heathrow recently, so they just thought maybe the partnerships are not in place or something like that. So I'm glad that you said that. So hopefully this gives a lot of peace of mind to a lot of community members, because it's been raised a lot of times. In terms
Absolutely.
of network,
sorry, just on that, I can add that there are 3 new airlines and ground handling partners that have signed up as part of that. So it's moving, it just takes time. Yeah,
of course. Thank you. In terms of network, one thing I wanted to ask as well, you must know over the weekend, the incident with WoW when their wallet was hacked and the token price had gone down and a massive number of tokens were sold in the market. So a lot of community members raised concerns like, what sort of security does Aventus have, and how can we prevent that? And if anything was like that to happen, what's the protocol that we'll have to follow? And I understand obviously we have very good security, but the community just wanted some sort of reassurance from you, just to know like what the protocol is.
Absolutely. So, well, let's start by just being very clear on what happened within the VOW ecosystem, right? As far as I am aware, it is one of their individual whales. So it's not like it was any of the commercial entities or the foundation that were compromised, anything that is within the control of those building the protocol. It is one of the people who were involved in and owns a lot of VOW, and that person personally got hacked, or somehow their private keys were compromised. And it so happened that they had a big position of VOW and that got dumped in the market. So to protect against that for any ecosystem is very difficult, because you have to make sure that every single participant, the thousands or tens of thousands of people that own the token, every single one is protected, or at least the bigger end. So a degree of that is education, right? I think that's about as much as you can do, really trying to help people, especially as you see certain wallets, if you're able to make contact or you know who it is, helping educate people on the latest security standards, just to try and minimize that risk. When it comes to any of the amounts owned by the Aventus Foundation or any of the commercial entities within the Aventus ecosystem. Here, obviously, that sits closer within sort of reasonable control. So from what I understand, the Aventus Foundation's process is all community treasury sits within a multi-signature wallet on Ethereum. That's a wallet that's been there since 2017, and it has multiple signatories. So like a bank account, like a corporate bank account, you need multiple parties to sign off for anything to move, and these are independent parties. So if one party, two parties get hacked, it doesn't matter because you need at least 3 parties to sign off, something like that. When it comes to the commercial entity, it's similar processes. And more importantly, when we deploy solutions for our clients, we use something called HashiCorp Vault, which is a cryptographic key management tool that's existed for many years. It's in Amazon Web Services and is considered sort of like among the gold standard of crypto key management. So that makes sure that any of our clients providing platforms have the best security standards to try and prevent anything being compromised and kind of dumped in any market.
Okay, thank you. I think that should explain and put a lot of people's mind at rest again. So in terms of network, you know how we've got ERC20 Ethereum transfers, and then we've got AVN, and then we've got Parachain. So community members wanted to know, like, is there any plans, in future to move on to like just one single network rather having 3 different, networks and to transfer and lift in and load in process and things like that? So is there any plans to, move into a single network?
So we would have to evaluate the benefit of doing so. I think if we look at the market today, nobody would be able to say in 5 or 10 years' time, here are the 3 or 4 major blockchains that will win. We may have opinions or guesses today, but similar to the kind of .com bubble back in the day, nobody could have told you that definitely it will be Amazon and Google that win that war, or whatever the particular companies are, right? So this notion of interoperability and keeping compatibility across Ethereum, which seems to be the dominant market force in at least more utility-rich blockchains today, and then across the Polkadot ecosystem, allows us to evolve with the market. I think this gives the Aventus community the best benefit of kind of hitching a ride with the winning horse as the market evolves over time. And if you look at the way the internet rolled out, right, it started as these various little siloed intranets, and then they all got connected together. And there is that kind of pattern emerging in the blockchain industry as well, where slowly but surely this internet of blockchains is being created, where all of these siloed ecosystems are starting to be connected together. So if there is a good reason to just move to one chain with these new community proposals, we should absolutely, someone should put that forward and we should vote on it. But I personally don't see one right now.
Thank you. The next questions are about Polkadot. So as you know, with Polkadot 2.0 is going live soon. So is there anything you're working on? For example, there's a lot of chains that do, cross-chain transfers and, for example, HydroDex and things like that. Or is there any partnerships with like existing parachains on the horizon potentially?
So yeah, let's start with Polkadot 2.0. So we really, at least from the commercial side of this ecosystem, the vision of how the economics of Agile core time work are quite beneficial relative to the parachain auction system. So obviously one of the most important things when you pitch an enterprise, when you're sitting with a CTO at a big company, they want to know, what is this going to cost me? And they want to sign off a budget for a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? And when you're telling them, well, it depends, there's volatility, and volatility is massive on your base currency that you're paying in, they say, okay, thank you, that's too risky. We're not financial traders, see you later. So on the AVN, people can already see transactions are priced in $1 not in a certain amount of AVT to try and give that predictability. But still, we have the variable nature of how much is it going to cost to release a parachain slot? How much is it going to cost for the gas on Ethereum for the bridge? So there are still elements, and that means our collators also struggle to always make sure that they are making enough money to cover their energy bills or not. Yeah. So with the new pricing model, with Agile core time, you can get much greater predictability over what that pricing is going to look like long term, and you can get better guarantees. So that makes it easier to sell the technology. at the base layer. In terms of collaborations, the Polkadot ecosystem is still relatively new, right? In terms of user numbers, it's not quite as established as Ethereum or sort of Polygon right now, but it's growing nicely, and it almost certainly has the best fundamental technology. So none of our clients on the commercial front have had a need for DEXs or any of that kind of functionality. These are amazing concepts, but quite futuristic concepts. It's hard enough to get an enterprise to use a blockchain, never mind to start understanding what liquidity pools are or what any of this really kind of feature-rich on-chain functionality is. So we hope as the market matures over the coming years, there will be more and more demand for it, and we will absolutely leverage partnerships, but there just hasn't been a big need for that today. That being said, there are some gaming participants within the Polkadot ecosystem that we're exploring partnerships with for some of our deals, especially in the world of sports. So we're nothing to announce yet, nothing agreed yet, but we're certainly always open to it, and we are actively exploring some partnerships.
Thank you. I think you just answered my next question about gaming, because we talked about sports, we talked about music and gaming. But one of the community members, I think it was Pete, that wanted to know the mythical games. You know, a lot of gaming is now coming into Polkadot 2.0 and with jams, high speed. And so would we potentially see something like Bank or something, you know, so games built on top of Aventus as layer 2? And you know, obviously because there's not NFTs come in, and we've got sports and we've got music. So I think the gaming is quite a new feature coming into blockchain, and everybody's quite interested in that. So potentially, when can we see something like that happening?
It's a great question around the gaming piece. I'm not sure whether games themselves will be built on the Aventus network, but I think there will certainly be the ability to take digital collectibles that have been issued within the Aventus ecosystem and bridge them via XCM or otherwise into other ecosystems where the games are built and realize their utility there, really in this kind of world of interoperability, right? So I'm not saying, I have no idea what will be built on top of Aventus in the future as more and more people become aware of the network and the utility. But in the immediate short term, I see some of our partnerships gaining utility in other ecosystems and specifically in games.
Okay, is it the following couple of questions are about the VAO fork? You know, obviously we discussed it with the community, and now they're going to fork out the network. So how does the proposed fork look like, and you know, what would it mean for AVN transactions?
Yeah, so the VAO ecosystem, given the vote or the proposed vote that was going to go ahead of the acquisition, obviously the community was sort of a resounding no on that front, and for completely valid reasons, right? So the VAO ecosystem is going to fork the Aventus network. They are going to use their own token as the gas on their network and tweak it for their kind of requirements. However, they are going to make a contribution to Aventus community treasury of 4 million VAO. So that VAO is to be deployed for partnerships that leverage both ecosystems, but guarantee transactions on the Aventus network as well. So that way they've kind of they've obviously departed in terms of some of their core transactions being on the AVM, but they're actively contributing and looking to partner and continue to foster value across ecosystems with that community treasury grant.
So potentially, would Aventus benefit with any partnerships that VAO has with their clients because they're using AVN network?
Absolutely. So there's the VAO ecosystem, the companies involved there will not only will Aventus network clients also be able to leverage VAO functionality, but the other way as well. So more and more NFT and whatnot use cases are popping up in their ecosystem. They're already multi-chain, right? I believe they do some stuff on Binance Smart Chain. They've got their own tier 2 when they fork the Aventus network, and then there will be stuff within the Aventus network itself.
Okay. Following a couple of questions about tokenomics, because I think we recently discussed in Telegram as well that, you know, we had a vote split, I think last year. And so the community just want to know how is the, you know, split of the token supply, which is 10 million at the moment, how would that benefit? And is this something that really should be done? And if there's going to be another vote for such thing?
Yeah, so the token split vote was obviously approved, I don't know, a year or two ago. And the motivation, I believe, of why that was put forward was essentially there are not a lot of communities that have a total of about 10 million tokens. It's much more common to have hundreds of millions, if not billions of tokens, right? So because obviously AVT was minted back in 2017, that was before there was a lot of track record to analyze and whatnot. So the idea was just to update it to be more uniform with the wider ecosystem. The challenges were that when talking to centralized exchanges, it's very difficult to distribute additional tokens each wallet on a centralized exchange would need. In the case of a split, you obviously need to work with the centralized exchange. And if somebody doesn't, otherwise everything has to happen on chain, and it becomes very difficult to ensure that every individual has the tokens they're supposed to have, and there's no kind of fraud that takes place. So because it was not possible to get the buy-in from the major centralized exchanges in the ecosystem, obviously that vote couldn't be executed and was ultimately retracted. Could it happen in future? Absolutely. If people want to put forward that vote again, and if somebody, maybe there's somebody in the community who has relationships in the various exchanges and can make that happen. But it was not possible for the Aventus Foundation to make happen.
Okay. And as we're moving on to the governance votes now, and most of the things will be controlled by the community and their votes and stuff. So how would you stop, or not stop actually, but how would you tackle, whales, for example, manipulating the votes? And if somebody holds like a crazy amount of AVT token and, something silly comes forward and they vote it, and how can that be tackled, whales manipulating votes?
Yeah, so there's a few elements to examine here. Obviously, in our typical democracies, we essentially validate somebody's identity, and every valid identity gets one vote. All votes count equal. The difficulty in a blockchain system is if you say, okay, every wallet only gets one vote, every wallet that contains tokens, all whales will do if they have 1 million tokens is split their 1 million tokens into 100,000 wallets. And then you've got the same problem again, right? Then people just don't hold all in one wallet, they put them in multiple wallets. If votes were to take people's identity, kind of goes against some of the fundamental premises of these networks, right? Decentralization, anonymity, and we're not electing a leader of a country, we're deciding around technical parameters on a network that will affect the token and the utility thereof. So given that, there's also an argument to be made that somebody with 1 million tokens versus somebody with 10 tokens, the person with 1 million tokens has a lot more to lose if something goes wrong, just given the amount of value that they have decided to hold within that network. So to a degree, it is fair that they have a bigger say. Should it be that much of a bigger say? That's where it becomes challenging. But technically speaking, this is a very hard problem to solve. And so at the end of the day, the way it works out is the more token, every token equal vote, because that's a unit of value, a unit of utility within the ecosystem. If you have 100,000, then you get a greater say than somebody who has 10, because maybe somebody who has 10 doesn't mind burning his 10 to destroy the value of the 100,000.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's pretty much all the questions. But now, community has always seen a professional side of you, and they just want to know a fun side of you as well. So they've prepared some sort of fun questions, and there's quite a few. The first one was, what kind of music do you like?
Well, yeah, this one's fairly straightforward. I mean, most of what I listen to is hip hop and rap. I guess growing up during the 2000s, that was most booming genre. So that's where I felt.
Somebody actually suggested that Alan should make a dancing video.
I'll get my little TikTok dances out.
What's your average daily routine?
I like to keep fit. So obviously work a lot. I work most days, but I like to try and get outside, spend a bit of time in the sun, spend a bit of time in the sea. I play a couple different sports, whether it's some golf or wakeboarding, and otherwise just hit the gym and move some weight around.
Nice. And if you had a day off with absolutely nothing to do, how would you spend it?
Probably get rid of my phone. Constantly being pinged, and there's so many messages. So first thing would be is just leave the phone at home and get out of the house. Move around, be active, eat good food, spend time with the people that I really like. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what we do, but just kind of unplug a little bit from all the screen time.
Yeah, sounds fun. So do you trade any crypto or follow any other projects and markets and think, oh yeah, that's a good project, or do you invest in other projects?
So personally, absolutely. I mean, I think you've got to live and breathe this industry if you want to try and lead a company in it reasonably well. I don't want to get into the details of which ones because yeah, it's just not. I don't want to give any investment advice, but I think it's important. Yeah, I absolutely keep track of other projects. I love learning what people do right, what people do wrong, and see if there's anything that we can apply to our ecosystem as well. And there's so much brilliant innovation within this space. It's really great to keep on top of what everyone's doing.
Nice. Would you ever consider building another project?
So not in the foreseeable future. I think there's still a lot we would like to achieve within this Aventus ecosystem that we haven't achieved yet. We've made some good progress over the years. We've had some setbacks, but there's a lot more to do here. In the future, maybe, but I went straight from university into kind of building businesses, right? So I would also like to spend some time on the slightly other side of the table in kind of big enterprises and working and understanding the world from that side. So never say never, but it's unlikely I would go straight from doing this into kind of building another blockchain business.
Okay, thank you. And what's one last question? Can you cook? And if you can, what's your specialty?
I mean, I can eat. But yeah, cooking is, I'm not very good at it. I haven't spent a lot of time practicing. My wife is an absolute tank as well. And whenever I try to make any food, she tells me, no, maybe not, leave it to the professionals. So unfortunately,
that just says that how much good you are. If she doesn't let you cook, then that says a lot about your cooking.
Yeah, exactly, right. I made her something when we were traveling recently, and she was trying to micromanage the whole time and then said, okay, see you in 2 months.
I think that's everything. Thanks very much for taking the time as well. And we'll do another AMA. I think there was quite a few other questions, but I understand we're on a time limit. So we will plan something again at the end of the month or just whenever you're available, and we can take it from there.
Sounds like a plan. Always happy to do these, and periodic updates probably make sense. So yeah, thanks for managing it all, and see you later.
All right, thanks. Take care. Bye.